Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new season of the New Earth podcast. This third season is going to deal with healing the world. We have spent the past decades working on ourselves, healing our trauma, reaching the ego death, and most of us are still in the process of doing that. But as we're seeing, there is no way of healing ourselves other than by also shining our light of healing outside of us so that our entire surroundings get healed and we are allowed to truly heal our trauma and to truly become our highest self. This new season is going to focus both on holistic ways of healing ourselves, but also on the things we must change altogether as a collective in our society. And I'm going to give, together with other guests, specific advice on how to do it through daily gestures so that we can finally raise the consciousness of humanity to a next level and that peace can be established in the world. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. This is the third season called Heal the World. We're going to be talking about topics that not only have to do with our growth and with our healing, but also with how to reflect that healing on the world around us, on the people around us, and on the global scale, at the global scale. Today we are going to be talking about stress, not just as something that we experience, but also as part of the oppression we receive from the system we're part of. I feel like most of the population at this point has realized that we don't really live in a land of freedom. But there are several reasons for that. Some have to do with what is actually happening at the spiritual level between light and darkness and God and evil and all these sort of things. We're talking about the highest dimension, but we all are part of, at the same time, multiple dimensions, which is the physical, the Newtonian physical dimension, the quantum physical dimension, and then the spiritual dimension. Therefore, with this new season, we're also going to explore topics like social justice or what is actually happening in our system, the deep state kind of topics, and a lot of things that I've learned on my own through first-hand experience, because I myself also am a whistleblower. So I know a lot of things about how society works and what happens behind the scenes and what the population is not told. And it's important to share knowledge because we are all part of a system. And so until we realize that we're part of a system, we're not going to be able to coordinate effort. Until we all share the same knowledge, we're not going to be able to coordinate effort and to do things in the right way, in the proper way. Like in order for us to obtain a result, we need to push all together in the same direction. But we live in a society right now where there's a lot of gaslighting because people who are, there's this darkness and light sides. And now what is happening is that they got mixed up in the sense that a lot of things that are carried out by God's army in a sense, but like the good in the world is seen as bad because the darkness has created so many used so many manipulative strategies to manipulate the population, so much propaganda that now people are confused, like they don't know who is on what side, what is actually going. Because there is a spiritual war ongoing right now, and it really is about God against evil. It's really happening right now, and I'm part of it. I'm obviously on God's side. But it's important for the population to be aware of what is actually going on so that the population can take the right side. And really it's not too difficult to figure that out sometimes. But ignorance is our worst enemy. Unconsciousness is our worst enemy because it's easy to believe that some actions are bad, that some people, some politicians are doing bad things in the world if we don't know the background, if we don't know the behind the scenes, if we don't know what is actually happening behind closed doors, what certain things really represent, who is behind certain offices and governments and things. So if we don't know all of that, the same scene, the same circumstances, the same situation, we can interpret it in a way or in a completely opposite way if we have or don't have the information we need to properly make up our mind about what is going on. And so nowadays, crucially important to share with the population knowledge that whistleblowers have, people that actually had first-hand experiences of what happens behind the scenes, like myself. And so I'm going to be interviewing people who have knowledge about what happens in the world and things we're usually not told about, or topics we usually are not educated about, because there's someone profiting from our ignorance, from us not knowing what is going on. So today we're going to be talking about stress and how it's used against us, and how to realize that and to also avoid stress or to transmute energy. Because stress can be energy or it can be stress. It's just everything is energy. We call it stress because we go through it without using it. It's like if you jump in the ocean and you're not a surfer, you're going to be thrown from one side to the other by the waves, right? But if you're a surfer, you see waves as something you can transmute, you can surf on. And so it's a completely different experience, but the situation is the same. The kind of forces are the same. And so it's the same is for stress in our society. We undergo stress, or we perceive it as stress, because we are unconscious, we are unaware, we are intentionally being kept not aware of what is going on. And so because of that, we don't understand what is going on. We are not capable of understanding the patterns and of predicting what is going to happen around us and to us. And because of that, it's stressful. It's just a wave we're not predicting, and so we cannot surf on. So what is stress ultimately? We undergo a lot of different types of stress. First of all, stress at the physiological level causes a lot of negative effects. It's really the main reason why we age, why we develop illnesses, and it's all because it kind of throws us out of phase. Like, we are synchronized, our body functions are perfectly designed for them to do certain things at a certain time and to be predictable. Like, our body needs predictability, our body needs routines, our brain needs routines, our spiritual self needs routines. Like, we need to know what we're doing so that we inhabit this body, this machine. We need to know to be able to predict our environment, for us to be able to even just have our own internal body functions and maximize their efficiency and optimize their how we use nutrients, for example. So all of these things really depend on the fact that things can be predictable. Imagine you're like in a warehouse, right? I always give this analogy of the warehouse when I talk about the body. Imagine you're at a warehouse and you need to manage as best as possible the cargoes of goods, of things that get to you, that get delivered to your warehouse, and you need to dispatch them, and you need to put the goods that go in the freezer, in the cold rooms, and you need to put the right things at the right time in the right place, and everything has to be coordinated. It's not just you alone. There are multiple employees that work in their warehouse, and they have to do all of these things. So everything goes well if you know at what time the cargoes are going to be delivered. And so if you don't know what is going to happen, if at some point everything gets there all at the same time, you're like, I don't know what is going to happen. Like, you cannot predict how many people you need at any given time. And so it's really impossible to do business without predictability. So we need to be part of a predictable environment for us to optimize even our internal body functions, because our body is like a warehouse in that sense. Like, we eat or we receive energy from the outside, and we need to do something with it. Like, it has to be predictable. And if it's not predictable, we need to have standard operating procedures put in place so that we can transmute that energy and use that energy for something, like to use it for something that is good for us, that is positive for us. If it's constantly just things that we don't know how to use, we don't know when they're going to arrive, we don't know how much it is and how to handle it, then it becomes destructive. That becomes stress. So it's important to understand the lack of stress does not come from being in a cave. Lack of stress comes from being able to understand and control and predict our environment. If we can, then we're stress-free, in the sense that we live in a place that is controlled or predictable, or that we know how to handle. We are equipped to handle the changes in our environment. If you're not, then it becomes stress, because we are not ready to handle whatever comes our way. And so what is stress in our society? Stress is the fact that, first of all, we, the population, we, the people, we are not in control of our governments. We believe we are, but oftentimes it depends. It depends on who is at the government. But most of the times we are not in control, or we don't know what is going on for several reasons. Even when good politicians go to the government, they strategize in ways that are oftentimes passive aggressive or covert, or they cannot say out loud what they're actually doing, and there is no way for them to tell us what they're doing. So that's why I'm doing this, right? To make you guys understand how the world works, so that you can understand your environment and what politicians do, even if you're not part of the government yourself, because maybe the government is on your side, but you don't know that it is, and you don't know what's behind the scenes, and you don't know what is going on, and so you cannot even understand that what is happening goes towards your benefit. So it's important, because otherwise we're constantly under stress, because even if politicians who are on our side are the government, we don't know, and so we're constantly under this stress or fear that we don't know exactly what they're doing, and maybe we think that they're doing it against us. So our environment has become extremely stressful because we are all in this world in which we are continuously at war against other nations, against other players, not necessarily nations, but groups of people, associations of people, fraternities. Call it evil, call it God's army, call it as you like, but there are these two or multiple sides. They fight against each other at any given time. And even if we are told we are at peace, or the only war ongoing right now is the war in Gaza, that's not true. There is a much bigger war that goes on all the time. It's kind of like a cold kind of war. It's a war that is made by financial barriers, financial penalties, movements of people from one place to another, human trafficking. Like, it's a war that is made of really darkness and light fighting against one another. It's a war made of people fighting for the good of everyone, or people fighting to oppress us, to vampirize us. So there are these two factions. There is a party that constantly tries to use humanity for its own advantage, like a parasite, and there is a party that is humanity, that is trying to save humanity, that is trying to make the world a better place. There are a lot of political activists that are doing it. There are a lot of NGOs and like non-governmental organizations, and a lot of associations, and a lot of people like myself who are doing the best for everyone. And we're all the army of God, in a sense, the army of the good. And we're all fighting against those trying to bring chaos, those who see the world in this binary way in which they believe that everybody is either a tool or an enemy, and because of that they need to vampirize everybody and to fight against anyone who is not on their side. So there is constantly this war. Because of that, we constantly undergo stress, because especially right now there is because of these strategies that are ongoing, because these two armies don't have a suit that tells you what kind of side they're on. They don't have a badge, they don't have a sign on them to tell you, hey, I am in the evil army, or I'm in the God's army. Like, they don't tell you that, right? So we don't actually know. So, and we live in a world, we're raised in a world where we are not taught to recognize between these two things. Not everybody, like some people are, but most people are not. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes just it happens, like we really are in this world in which we are kept confused oftentimes, and we are gaslit about who is on what side, so that while we grow up, either we are, we don't really know, and so we don't take the side of the good, or we're intentionally told that the evil people are the good ones and the good people are the evil ones, so that we take the wrong side. And so it's important to understand what good and evil. You see that I'm not using the word good and bad. I'm using the word God and evil, good and evil right now, because this is a completely different dimension. I've said multiple times in my previous seasons and episodes as well, that good and bad, it doesn't really make any sense in our world, because good and bad are words that we use in the Newtonian dimension. In the Newtonian dimension, everything in the universe is made by this yin and yang, by these things that are dynamic, and because of that there is positive and negative, and there is abundance and there is poverty, and there are all these things that just, it's high and low. We live in a universe that is dynamic. And it's dynamic because of these two forces, which is positive and negative, attraction, repulsion, and all these things. But these things have nothing to do with God and evil, with good and evil. So at this spiritual level, God and evil exist, good and evil exist, God and the devil exist. And so this is, spiritually speaking, there is constantly this war ongoing between these two sides that truly exist. But at our level, at the Newtonian physical dimension, good and bad is just words. Like there's no real thing as good and bad. It's just we go through transformations because we're supposed to, because our body is just a tool for us to carry out our function in the physical world. But ultimately, our function depends from the spiritual self, from our spiritual self, from our higher self, from our mission, from the divine mission we have. And there are people who are just evil. Like there are people who have this seed of evil that they need to purge from, they need to cleanse from, that they need to repent from sins or things that they have done even in past lives, choices that they keep making. Like I tend to really divide people in good and evil based on their behaviors, right? Like I give people choices all the time. Like I'm supposed to, based on the function I have in the world, I'm supposed to give people choices so that they can discern between bad weeds like tares and the wheat in the kingdom of God, right? And so because of that, I give people choices. And there's people who constantly choose to do evil against others, even when they have the choice of not doing that. They constantly choose to do evil just intentionally, and they constantly try to find ways of doing evil by masking it as something legal, something okay, something good for others. So they constantly do that. It's their inner engine. And this is something I had to learn by myself, because I was born a good person. I was born a very naive and cute and kind and compassionate little girl. And so I had to learn through time that evil really exists in the world, that there are people who truly function that way, even if we don't like to admit it, even if we want to believe that everybody is in some way good. This is not true. There are some people who are really just evil, and it's unfortunate, but this is it. There are people who just see humanity as a tool for profit, and they don't care about killing people, about torturing people. There are people who constantly sacrifice children for satanic rituals, or abduct people to rape them, or commit sex trafficking. Like there are people who do very horrific things, or like trafficking of organs. There are people who do horrific things, and even when they have the choice, even when they have the choice of not doing evil, they still do evil regardless. And so that is evil, and there are other people who, in the same way, regardless of the consequences, when they're put in front of the choice of doing good or evil, even if doing good will have negative consequences on them, they will still do good. And I had to learn it on my own, in the sense that I have been tested a lot of times in my life. I've been through extreme hardship due to my choices of being a whistleblower. And every time I found myself in front of the choice, do I stop? Do I keep going? Do I do good, or do I accept to just surrender? Every time I chose to do good regardless of the consequences, because that's my inner engine, and so I had to learn by myself that in the world there are these two different kinds of people, and I didn't like to admit it at the beginning. I didn't want to see it because I wanted to see that everybody was good, but it's not true. There are people who do evil intentionally, and it's nothing to do with the food chain and things like that, which is nature. It has nothing to do with that. Certain things are natural, and it's like the yin and yang, the food chain, and how everything is ultimately a cycle, right? And because of that, we eat each other, and that's different than doing evil. Doing evil, it's sadism. Let's not confuse the fact that lions kill gazelles because they need to eat them, and by doing that, they're having a function in the food chain, because lions help keep the number of gazelles steady, constant, so that the gazelles don't grow too much and don't eat all the grass, because otherwise it becomes self-limiting for them. And so lions exist because the gazelles exist, and it's totally fine. What it's not totally fine is doing evil against others, because lions are not trying to do evil against the gazelles. Lions just simply need to eat gazelles because they are carnivores, and carnivores don't have the capability of using vegetables to survive. They need to use the meat from another animal in order for them to survive. They literally could not survive just eating grass. And so for them to survive, they have to eat gazelles. By doing that, they're just having a role in the ecosystem, and that's totally normal. God and evil is a completely different thing. There is no need to do evil. There is no need to create chaos. God has created the world in a way that is perfect. The world is perfect. If we were to be good to each other all the time, things will be perfect. So doing evil is something that disrupts the balance, disrupts this homeostasis. So it's not something necessary to the system. It's actually completely unnecessary and detrimental. So that is evil, which is completely different from good and bad, like in a food chain kind of meaning, or positive and negative. Like we go through poverty, we go through wealth, we go through moments in which we are expanding and moments in which we are shrinking, and this is totally normal, and it's part of our growth as much as the cells in our body go through the same. Like this is part of like the world, and the fact that we live in an environment that is a homogeneous dispersion of molecules, but it's homogeneous at the macroscopic level. At the microscopic level, at our level, it's not homogeneous at all. My body is very dense. The air next to my body is not very dense, right? And so you see there is this different, but because everything is dynamic and everything tends to homeostasis and to disperse homogeneously in the system, it's normal to go through pressure from the outside for this density to change and to go back to the environment, right? And so this constant change, you see that we go through, that we're born, and then we grow and we accumulate molecules that we eat from the outside, and we accumulate them in us, and we create this conglomerate that is our body, that grows and grows and grows by accumulated things from the outside and keeping them inside. And then we grow, and then we get to a point where we cannot grow enough, and if we keep trying to grow, then we receive pressure from the outside for us to go back. And with time, things just slow down, and we start decaying again and going back to the earth. And you see the matter how things constantly change, because that's how things are in our universe. They're dynamic. Going back to the stress we receive in the world, this really comes from us not understanding what is going on in the world and not understanding our environments, our surroundings. I'd like to be able to tell you that you don't need to believe in God, but reality is that you can have any beliefs you like, and that truth is relative. And I would like to tell you that everything is allowed. You can be whatever you like. You can do whatever you want. This is not the truth, so I cannot tell you that. And so we need to awaken to all the different dimensions in order for us to truly bring stress to zero and to truly become immortal, in a sense, to truly stop undergoing stress. And it all comes from faith, from understanding. That's the ultimate zero, when we finally recalibrate on the truth, is when we realize, when we remember, oh, God exists. Oh, I'm part of the kingdom of God. Oh, I have to have faith because everything is going exactly how it's supposed to go. Once we get to that point, that's when we let go and stress disappears. But also, it's not just about that. Again, we have to go through all these different levels of understanding. First, we need to understand the Newtonian physical dimension and what is happening in our reality and what is going on and how people work and how we react to triggers in certain ways and how we interpret things in a certain way and how we identify with our ego, and that makes us be easily triggered by things that happen around us. And that's the first the first layer of stress. And then we need to understand the second level, which is, in the quantum physical dimension, still we go through stress because that stress comes from food or from things that we go through, and that at the quantum level and at the physical level, even if we believe they're healthy, maybe they're not. Maybe there's some, energetically speaking, they are not healthy, they're evil. And so we're giving negative things, we're giving things that create stress for our body. Then the next level, we need to understand these two sides, which is evil and God, and we need to start seeing who is on which side and who is evil and who is in the army of God. And once we understand that, that's when we actually see the truth. And once you see the truth, then you just embody your mission and you just do whatever you're supposed to do in the world, and you stop asking yourself, why am I here? Who I am? What am I doing here? What's the point of all this? And once you stop asking those questions, you know that you just have to do what you're supposed to do so that things go how they're supposed to go, and so that you keep doing good in the world and making the world a better place. That's when stress starts disappearing and everything starts becoming just things that happen around you, and they're normal. Everything becomes normal. So I feel like most people have this idea, and I'm gonna be talking more specifically about each one of these topics that I mentioned: the Newtonian stress, the quantum physical stress, the spiritual stress, and how to deal with all of these things. I feel like most people believe that removing stress has to do with exclusion, like excluding things from your life, eliminating things from your life. And it does. But at the same time, it's more about inclusion of things as the norm. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say, and again, we go back to the routine, to the control, like let's say you're working and your boss sends you emails over the weekend all the time, right? And so you start responding during the weekend, but you're stressed out. You're like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to respond. I'm like, this is my free time, but he keeps emailing me. What do I do? And you keep responding back, but then you get frustrated, right? So yes, obviously you want to stop responding to his emails, but what you want to do is not having your boss stop sending you emails. Things like stress from the outside, evil things that get to you, are always going to exist. So it's not a matter of excluding your boss's emails. It's not a matter of your boss stopping to send you emails. It's a matter of you understanding that it is normal that your boss is gonna try to send you emails over the weekend. It is up to you not to respond. It is up to you not to check your email in the weekend. It is up to you to include that behavior as part of the norm, and the fact that people are going to be abusive as the norm, and dealing with that in a different way. So that's what I mean. It's like getting higher and higher in consciousness doesn't mean making things disappear, doesn't mean changing others, doesn't mean changing your environment immediately. It means understanding, gaining consciousness about, okay, this is how things are, this is how the environment is, this is how people work. There are people who are evil. There are people who allow themselves to become vessels of abuse for others. So once you understand that, it becomes predictable, right? And so you're like, okay, so my boss is going to send me emails over the weekend, like I just have to stop responding, to stop checking. I have the right to stop checking my email, and to stop responding to him, and nothing is going to happen, because it's my right to not respond to him, because it's my vacation, it's my free time, right? I'm off. So it's up to us to start understanding these things, because it's not that things change around us, like obviously the world. Do you think this is just, let me give you another example. Do you think that people like Elon Musk or Trump, for example, do you think that they have zero stress? Do you think that once you get rich, you're not going to have any problems anymore? Do you think that people who are very famous live in this beautiful, perfect world in which nothing bad happens around them? Oh no. The richer you get, the more you attract people who try to get your money, people who are opportunistic, people who try to bug you all the time, lawsuits against you because people know you have money and they try to sue you all the time. So it's not that by getting higher and higher in the hierarchy of society, or by getting wealthier, or by getting more conscious, you stop attracting people who try to hurt you or abuse you, and you just start living in a world in which there are no problems anymore. The problems increase. What changes is you. What changes is how you deal with those things. And so for people to go higher in the hierarchy, there is this view. I feel like there are a lot of scammy pages and profiles and people who try to tell you, if you do these things, you're gonna get rich and not have problems anymore. But that's not how it works. Rich people have a lot of problems too. It's just that they learn how to deal with them in a predictable way, or in a way that doesn't stress them out. So if you get money, then you have the money to hire lawyers to deal with all the people filing lawsuits against you. So you don't have to worry about that. That thing is still there. You just now have the money to pay someone else to deal with that. So it's not that you don't have to think about it. Those things are still there, right? You just are not thinking about that all the time, or you don't want to think it, because again, you can hire a lawyer and still have this thought in the back of your head all the time, stressing you out. Or you can be like, I let go control, this is going to go how it's supposed to go, and that's it. And I'm doing my best to do what I can to keep myself safe and keep myself from being damaged. However, what happens afterwards, it's not. That's fine. It's just my destiny in a sense. So once you accept that, yes, you have to do your best, obviously. In Italy, we have a saying that says, aiutati che Dio t'aiuta, which means help yourself and God will help you. Which means, God acts through us as well. Like, we just have to understand we need to do our best. We can't just sit and wait for things to happen around us, which is like, I feel like a lot of people believe that manifesting means praying then things happen and then things happen. No, that's not how this works. We need to do the right things, because quantically speaking, like from the quantum field standpoint, realities like quantum planes have certain features, certain characteristics, and so things, for example, in a quantum reality in which you are rich, you are not buying those very expensive shoes that you're going to buy today, because otherwise, if you buy those shoes, you're not going to have the money to invest in your business. And so based on how you use that money you have today, then you enter a different quantum reality, and you are manifesting a different quantum reality, because the probability is the number of quantum planes in which you buying those shoes today lead you to you becoming rich in 10 years are very few, while the probability, like the number of quantum planes on which you buying the shoes today is bring you to become poor in 10 years are a lot. And so the probability that you end up in those quantum fields, in those quantum planes, is much higher, right? And so this means that our actions determine what kind of reality we are living, what kind of things we are manifesting. And so aiutati che Dio aiuta, help yourself, the God will help you, means we need to do the things. We need to do our best for us to manifest what we want. And then at the same time, we need to have faith that if things happen in certain ways because they need to happen in a certain way, and if they don't, it's because it wasn't supposed to. And everything is a learning experience. What we ultimately are here to do is to purge from evil, purge from sins, purge at the genetic also, and at the epigenetic and psychological, and in all possible kinds of levels. We are here to cleanse and to purify ourselves and to be able to ascend spiritually. Okay, this is what we're here to do. And everybody, including people who are evil today, they also are here to purge and to cleanse until they get to the point where they show their true nature, and that's it. But we are all here to purge and to cleanse from things that don't serve us, that are not us, and they're not good, they're evil. That's what you're here to do. So ultimately, even if we believe, yes, I have to manifest this, I have to be wealthy, I have to do that, this is not it. This is just a mundane reality that we're just living, but it's like a dream. But reality is that our mission is not to become wealthy in this lifetime. Our mission is to purge, purify, and purify the world and society from evil. That's all we need to do. And as part of it, we are part of a world in which we need to acquire wealth and power, or we need to take care of others, so we need to take care of ourselves. So we need to do certain things, because in the puzzle, in all this huge game, we need to do that, period. Because we are all part of a system in which everybody of us makes moves that affect the whole system. And so sometimes we don't realize the long distance effects of our actions. Maybe what you're doing today is just you're sending a fax or sending an email, and you're like, I'm sending an email for my boss, and that's it. That I work in this company, and I don't know, I'm sending, what is my role? Sounds like you have no role. And instead, maybe, again, there is this whole spiritual war that is going on at all times, and you don't know that email is on either one of those sides, that fax is on, sending that fax is a gesture that is going to help either one of these two sides do something. So you're having a role. Maybe today you decide to send that fax, and you're helping God's army to bring forth the good. And maybe instead you shouldn't send it, and maybe you're gonna have an issue and you're gonna spill coffee on the machine is gonna break, and you're not gonna be able to send that fax any longer. So and we don't realize that things go exactly how they're supposed to go, because ultimately we are purging from evil regardless. God always wins. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of, this doesn't mean that you can do nothing. This just means that if we let go of control and have faith and do our best to do good things in the world, then good things are going to happen in the world, And so doing the best to do good things in the world also means sometimes asking questions, like asking your boss, why do you want me to send this fax? Who is this fax for? And starting to realize and to figure out, okay, this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, this is going to help good people, this is going to damage good people. So we need to start becoming aware and becoming active participants in the divine order of things. Because otherwise, if we're not active participants and we're just unconscious, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know which side we're helping, and most of the times we're actually helping the opposite side, the evil side, because God works with free will, and God gives people free will, and instead evil manipulates people to get on his side. And so most of the times, if you're just naive, if you don't ask questions, if you don't know what you're doing, most likely you're actually working for the evil side of things. So going back to talking about stress, this is what I mean. There are people who are stressless because they don't care, and so they just are like, I don't care, I don't want to know, I'm just doing my thing. But you can tell that those people have a light that is really gray, in a sense. They don't care about people suffering. They don't care if their privilege comes from suffering of others. And that's not what you want to do, right? And so, in time, things get back to them, And for them to maintain this state, they have to accept, not truly be joyful, because you can only be joyful if your conscience is clean, if you're like, I can't sleep at night, I know that I did good things. And instead, people who just decide to not care are people who, for them to do that, they have to completely exclude, to pretend not to see a whole part of reality and to create a whole fictitious narrative in their mind. But for them to do that, they're aware that they're doing that. For them to do that, they have to renounce to the joy. They have to just accept to feel only contentment and sadistic pleasure. Those are the only two feelings that they can feel. They have to completely abandon joy, real love. They have to accept to chase and to only feel artificial feelings, things that are fake, things that are based on a fictitious narrative. And so it's a very sad life in the end. So all these choices, these negative choices we make, get back to us in a different kind of stress, which is a stress that is subconscious. And so it's not that, not caring allows you to not have stress. It's a stress that becomes subconscious, because subconsciously your brain knows what you're doing. And actually most of these people are conscious of what they're doing. So it's not just subconscious. They have to constantly make choices in their life. For example, the choice of lying all the time, the choice of putting on a social mask all the time, the choice of compartmentalizing their friendships, because with some people they are a certain person, with other people they are a certain other person, because based on the truth they want to not see for them to keep their narrative, they have to compartmentalize. So there's so many sacrifices that these people have to do that ultimately are a source of stress for them, because then when people meet, they have to remember, okay, this person I told us this person this thing, and this other person this other thing. So don't think that people who maintain this narrative in order for them to avoid stress, be privileged and not care, actually don't have stress. Again, complete lack of stress only comes, and this is again a huge stress for them. So it's not a little bit of stress, it's a lot of stress. And most of the times these people end up also being accused of being criminals, or like being hated by people who work for them. So there is a lot of stress that comes in other ways to them, and what goes around comes around. So it's gonna get to them, don't worry. But the only way to actually decrease to zero your stress is to embrace the divine dimension, and to remember about it, to become part of it, and to have faith that things are going exactly in the way in which they're supposed to go, and to keep going, and to keep walking, and to keep doing your thing. That's the only way in which you can truly decrease stress to zero, regardless of your circumstances. And it's absolutely feasible. I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it in all possible kinds of ways. I have a lot of stress coming my way, but believe me, in my circumstances as a whistleblower, I could have a lot more stress than this. And instead, I've really decreased this to almost zero. And most of my stress ultimately comes from nutrition, heat, and unpredictable things that still I'm starting to include in this vision, and I'm starting to become just part of how life works. Once you start having this view that you go higher and higher in consciousness, then all these things that happen to you become just the norm. And so the norm is predictable, and predictability excludes stress, because if something is predictable, it's just how it is, right? It's like you don't get upset because the sun rises every day. That's how the sun goes. We've been knowing this for millions of years, right? And so we know that the sun rises at a certain point, and then there is sunset, and we know how the day and the daily cycles are going to go. And so that's not a source of stress for us anymore. We should know about that by this point, by now. So stress from a Newtonian perspective. So Newtonian perspective is, the Newtonian reality is the reality in which our bodies exist, we are part of the earth, and there is attrition, and there is gravity, and there's all these forces that are constantly present in the world, and forces that make us, hit a car when we're driving, or people tell us something that we don't like, and it hits our ego and it hurts our ego, and we react to that, or we get triggered and we get into our obsessive compulsive thinking. That is the Newtonian reality. That is where most of our stress really comes from. That is the grossest form of stress, the biggest form of stress. So this reality, and I've talked about this a lot in the previous seasons, despite I haven't presented it in this way. So this is a next level, because I'm also evolving in the meantime that I'm recording this podcast. And so as you can see, I have changed a lot, and I shed away a lot more layers of ego as compared to my previous seasons. And it's all about, I had a lot of ego deaths, and that allowed me to be able to tell you all of these things. The ego deaths are fundamental. And so in this reality, we identify with the ego, or with our body, or with a story that is us. That is our main source of stress, because whenever you live in a world that is binary, and for binary I mean there is you and then there is something else that is outside of you, then everything becomes a threat to your identity and to your survival as whatever you think you are. If you think you're a body, even the air is potentially a threat. If you think you're a woman, men are a threat. if you think you are a married woman, then other women will become a threat and you get jealous of your husband. So all of these things really depend on the fact that we believe that the only thing that exists is our identity in this mundane Newtonian dimension, which is just the lowest dimension of the universe. Imagine the universe as this ball, actually as a vase. Imagine a vase in which all these different dimensions that we talk about coexist in the same place. It's just that they are different densities of the universe. And I'll explain what I mean. Imagine this vase, the Newtonian physical dimension and the Newtonian forces and the Newtonian elements of the universe are very big stones. These big stones or pebbles, are part of this, are inside this vase. They're big and they're there, and that's the Newtonian dimension and the Newtonian forces, and everything is so gross and so big, right? But in between them, there is a lot of space, right? And so there are smaller pebbles in between them that fill out the empty space between them. That is the quantum physical dimension, the quantum physical forces. They are smaller molecules. We're talking about particles. They are quantum particles, right? And those quantum particles are the quantum dimension. And so people who are in their Newtonian dimension, they don't have the resolution on the universe to perceive the quantum physical dimension, because it's so tiny and so much smaller than them that they don't even have the resolution to see that, to perceive it. They don't have the sensitivity for that. They only care about very big reactions, very big interactions with people, egoic kind of interactions, very big things. They're not sensitive enough to understand, oh, wait a minute, this is just how the world works. Let me have a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness, be compassionate and understand that everything is going to go well, for example, right? They don't have this understanding, right? So everything becomes for them just a way of, just a game of egos, because they live in the egoic reality, which is the quantum physical reality, which is the biggest one, where the forces are big, like gravity, like big forces, big things. Then there is the quantum physical reality, in which instead forces are smaller, but ultimately they're more important because they actually determine all the interactions between all the particles of the universe. And so if you have access to the quantum physical dimension and you have a higher sensitivity and you start seeing these pebbles in between the layers, you understand both the smaller pebbles and the bigger ones, and so you have a much higher consciousness, you have a much higher awareness. And then in between those, there is even an extra layer, which is sand. So there is sand that fills out all those places, and that's the divine dimension. And then the divine dimension is what keeps together all the quantum physical particles, all the quantum layers, all the quantum fields. That's the divine dimension. It's the ultimate matrix we're embedded in. And then there is this tiny little force which keeps together these particles, which is, let's say, water. We can have water that fills out this vase, and that ultimately creates the medium in which all these pebbles, these sand, and these stones are immersed. And that's God. God is the ultimate thing that keeps everything together. It's the ultimate medium in which everything is immersed, is embedded. That's God. That's everything. And so once you have access to all of these things, you see that it's not a matter of excluding. You're including the Newtonian dimension, you're including the spiritual dimension, and you're including the divine dimension, the quantum field. You're including all of the dimensions. And you're just having a much higher resolution, and now you see the bigger things are as just grosser. They're not bigger and more important. They're just gross in the sense of bigger, like in the sense of lesser refined. And so the more your resolution increases, the more you understand how the world works, the more you have a resolution on this spectrum of things that we are, the more you start seeing the tiniest little frequencies that you didn't see before. And you start understanding, okay, so it's all good. You see that it's all good. It's a completely different view. So when we are in our Newtonian dimension, stress comes mostly from there, because we are completely unaware of all these medium in which we are immersed, and that everything is going exactly how it's supposed to go. So because of that, we just feel like this elephant, kind of like stepping in this room that is too small for it. We're too big and we're stepping around. And that's our ego. That's when we have an ego. When you have an ego, it's like having a surface around you, having like this ball that surrounds you, and then you go around and you step against people and you hurt others, right? That's when the game of egos make us forgetful of who we are and start making things lesser predictable, also because we don't have the awareness. If we don't have awareness, if you don't have consciousness of the entirety of the base, things are not predictable for you. There's always going to be something you don't understand, because imagine you are a huge rock in this thing and you don't even see that there is something in between the rocks. You only see the rocks. But the rocks are ultimately moved also by all of these other forces around them. So they're affected by all these forces. And so if you don't understand all the forces ongoing at all times in the universe, you're not going to be able to predict how the different rocks are going to move. You're not going to be able to predict people behaviors. Once you start understanding, okay, this person has an ego, this person has a trauma, this person has this kind of mental illness, this person believes these things, this person is a certain culture. So once you start understanding all of these behind the scenes, behind people, those are the forces that move people around, and they're more refined type of energies. Once you start understanding those things, then people become predictable, because you're like, okay, I know how I can expect from this person these sort of things. And we live in a society in which we are intentionally kept unaware about all of these things, because there is a whole pharmaceutical industry that benefits from our stress. The more stress, not only the pharmaceuticals, but also governments and associations and people who are corporations. Like, as long as we are under stress and we are kept in our Newtonian physical dimension, in our ego, we become predictable for people who have a higher awareness than us, and they can move us like puppets. And because we are unaware, that gives them control over us. And so if people are predictable, you can use others for your benefit. And if you keep them unaware, they keep benefiting you, and they don't know how to stop benefiting you. They don't even know that they're benefiting you. So we are kept in this constant stress, because at the neurobiological level, what stress does is it turns off the conscious parts of our brain. So our brain, as I often say, is a very simplistic way of describing the brain, but like it's very effective, I feel. And our brain is mostly made by these 3 layers, like everything in the universe is made of layers in a sense, and it's like a sponge. And so our brain as well. So the innermost part of the brain is the most ancient one, and is called the reptilian brain. And then the surrounding part is called limbic brain, and the surrounding part is called cortical brain. And that's the most external part of the brain. That's the most evolved one. However, the external part of the brain is turned off by the more innermost part of the brain, which is the reptilian and then the limbic brain. So these 2 layers are often active in the greater majority of the population. And those are the parts in which your compulsive thinking is, your obsessive thoughts are, your intrusive thoughts, the obsessions, addictions, dependencies, codependencies, emotional dependencies. All these things are really located in these parts of the brain, the innermost part of the brain. When those parts are on, because the universe is perfect, if you live in a world in which you need to understand your danger, you don't have a higher awareness, then you need to be able to handle the dangers around you. And so it gets to a point where the more you stay in that environment and in that mindset, because it's a mindset, so the more you stay in that mindset, the more you have to stay in that mindset, because that means that that's what you need, because that's the environment you have, and those are the threats to deal with on a daily basis. And therefore that means that you need to have access to those functions and to those ways of functioning for you to survive, because you will not understand a different way of functioning. That is your view, and that has to be your view. But once you start ascending to higher dimensions, then you start, and these things go together, they are necessarily together. When you start activating your higher parts of the brain, the conscious parts of the brain, you also start ascending. And these go together in the sense also that stress has to decrease in order for you to reactivate the conscious parts of the brain. Because again, if you are in a very stressful environment, then you need to be under stress. And so that's how it works. And so if you remove stress, then your brain is like, okay, I don't need to be in the fight or flight modality anymore. I don't need to be in the fight or flight mode anymore. I don't need to be under stress anymore. I don't need to be in this Newtonian view of the world anymore. I can now appreciate more refined things around me. And so as soon as stress declines a little bit, then finally that part of the brain turns off, and by turning off, it allows your consciousness to emerge, because your consciousness is constantly trying to reactivate, being like, okay, is this time? Is it time now? Is it time now? That's kind of like how it works. It's like, are you ready now for me to activate? So it's constantly trying to activate. But until you constantly use your fight or flight mode in your innermost part of the brain, that part is off. So it really feels like a switch in which you're like, oh wow, now I understand that I was just stressing out for nothing, right? And so it's a matter of understanding, of removing the stress. However, we are constantly kept under stress intentionally. And so the news, your boss, the corporation you work for, your government, there's so many ways in which we're constantly kept under stress intentionally, because if you're under stress, we don't understand what is going on. We're not capable of being conscious. And if you're not capable of being conscious, you cannot appreciate all the actual things, all the forces. You cannot understand all the forces that move you. However, if you're in that modality, you also, by not being conscious and by not seeing all these forces, your environment is very unpredictable. And so that becomes stress. And so you see how it's a vicious cycle. The more you stay in that modality, the more you're forced into that modality, the more things become stressful and go beyond just keeping you in your fight or flight mode. Because if your fight or flight mode is supposed to be activated and deactivated when needed, not constantly. Like in nature, animals turn on and off their fight or flight mode based on the fact that danger is present or not present. But they have a lot of free time in which they're just hanging out and enjoying themselves. And so in our society instead, we are not free animals. We are not wild animals. And so because we are kept in captivity, because we are domesticated animals kept in captivity, we are in a concentration camp. Because of that, we have become just pawns in the schemes, in the games of someone else who is making profit out of us. We have been enslaved, and simply we are being used. Our bodies are being used for profit. We are being used for profit. We are being used for profit in the form of taxes and employment and and consumers, and patients. We're just sources of money for someone else. But stress is the main source of our illnesses. And so either we are constantly kept under stress so that we don't understand what is going on, or we stop becoming pawns in these games. We stop becoming sources of profit. And so stress is intentionally induced to us. And again, removing stress is not a matter of actually removing the stressor. It's a matter of just understanding that stressor is going to be there until you change that. So that's why this season is called Heal the World, because again, we can do this thing forever, but we also, the whole purpose of it, again, is to purge evil, is to remove evil, right? So that we can rise our consciousness without having to constantly deal with stressful things. And things can be stressful if you deal with them in the wrong way, if they are unpredictable, if they're new, right? And so the ultimate goal is always obviously to make our environment less stressful, but we cannot do that from a stressful mindset. We need to do that from a consciousness mindset. So the first step we need to make is to include all these stresses, all these sources of stress as normal part of our world. And once we do that, then we can see all of that and be like, okay, now that those things are predictable for me and are not sources of stress anymore, I can be conscious enough to change them so that it's easier for others as well to be conscious, because it takes a lot of effort for you to be conscious in an environment that is very, very stressful. There are different kinds of environment. The environment can be very stressful, or it can be a little stressful. It can be very unpredictable, or it can be a little unpredictable. Ultimately, what we want to do is to create a world that is peaceful. And what does peaceful mean? Peaceful means predictable. Peaceful means you are sure that almost 100% of probability, you are sure that you have almost 100% of probability that nothing bad is going to happen to you within the next 24 hours at least. You are sure that a bomb is not going to be dropped on you within the next 2 days. That is predictability. Unpredictability is what is happening in Gaza, for example, in which people have to live constantly with it day by day, minute by minute, thinking, maybe a bomb is going to be dropped and I'm going to die. I'm not going to see my husband anymore. I'm not going to see my children anymore. That is extreme unpredictability versus living in an environment that is a lot more predictable. And don't get me wrong, because also living in a city like LA can be very predictable, very unpredictable, but also very stressful. Because again, when we live in cities, we just tend to this is what people in cities do. They make the norm. They include all the stress coming from the urban life and their employers and all the stress coming from their bosses and lack of jobs and all these things. They make it become the norm so that they get used to it. They get immunized to it, and they can reach consciousness regardless of how hostile the environment is. That doesn't mean that the environment is not hostile or that the environment is predictable. That just means that people make it become predictable once they accept, okay, this is how the environment around me is, this is how this works, I have to just accept it. And once you accept it, you get higher and you get a higher awareness. So this is really the Newtonian reality of things. When things are unpredictable because we are not conscious, we are in our own ego, we have trauma to solve, we don't understand why people are doing things, and they get on our nerves. And they get on our nerves because we ourselves are in a modality in which we don't have a higher perspective. We don't see their own trauma. We don't see their own triggers. We don't see that we, by existing sometimes, just trigger others, and it's not their fault either. They have their own unconsciousness. So once we understand these yin and yang, constant dynamic things that happen in the universe as part of the Newtonian physical dimension, then you're going to be like, okay, so this is just how the universe works. This is just how the food chain of things works. And again, this is just the first part, because for us to understand that, after we understand that, we start ascending to awareness. Once you ascend to awareness, you become aware of your own ego, of your own triggers, of your own trauma. You heal from those things. You start seeing those things in others. You start becoming more compassionate. And by doing that, what they do that before used to trigger you and to cause you stress stops causing you stress. And so by not causing you stress anymore, you see you have already ascended to a higher level of consciousness, because you're already more aware, you're already more capable of not undergoing stress because of those things that before used to cause you stress. So now you're in the quantum physical dimension in which we have reached a point in which you understand that it's all a matter of like your conduct as well, like how you behave is going to cause you to manifest certain things, but at the same time you are not aware of the spiritual dimension yet, and so you still believe that you're completely free to do whatever you like, and you have to achieve wealth and attract things, and you start trying to manifest and all of these things by just thinking, and you don't realize that we're all part of this constant spiritual war as well. So that's still a higher level of awareness and of consciousness. And from that point, you stop being stressed out by triggers and trauma and egos and things like that, and you start becoming more compassionate. The problems that come from this level of awareness, when it's not anymore about getting stressed out by these sort of interactions, or by not properly dealing with narcissistic people, or not properly dealing with people who have unresolved trauma. Once you start going past all of that, and now you don't read your boss's emails anymore, and you don't respond to the provocation of your grandmother anymore, and you don't care about what your mother-in-law says anymore. Once you stop reacting to things and you start taking a step back and be like, okay, let me be compassionate with that person, let me be the mature one, and not from ego, but from truly understanding, I've been there too, I've been in my ego too, I had an ego as well, I had to heal from trauma too. These people are just lesser conscious than me. Once you understand that, you start giving people breadcrumbs so that they also find their own journey, their own path, and they also heal. Once you understand that, still there are sources of stress that are sources that you don't think of, such as food, such as energies. Once you start getting at the quantum level, then the kind of trauma, the kind of stress that you absorb doesn't come anymore from words or from actions. It comes from energies that are the quantum level. So such as mass farming of animals, for example. Since I ascended to that level, I had to start being vegan, basically, because now I can't anymore eat things that come from hate and torture and pain, because my body recognizes those things. I am capable of understanding the energy contained in food. My body now is tuned, is capable of feeling the quantum level energy, because now I have refined my own energy so much, I've purified myself so much, that now I don't worry anymore about the grosser things, but now I can see the smaller ones, and because I can see them, they affect me. And so the next level is to really purify your body from those things, and then to retrain your body and your brain to recognize, okay, for example, I have, because I'm vegan, supplementing protein is my main concern, right? I want to make sure that I supplement enough protein, but it's not easy in a world in which, again, like we're still going towards not using tortured animals as sources of protein. And so because of that, it's the kind of healthy sources of protein that I find in a regular grocery store or on Amazon are very limited. And so, for example, and also our current way of creating food, of producing food, is very, very unconscious. And so we don't understand, we are not doing things in the right way. So for me, it's difficult, because if I had the money to create a brand of protein bars, I will do that, but I don't. And so because of that, I have to just eat what people make for me. And oftentimes people do things in a very unconscious way. So for me to be able to integrate protein, for example, I have to eat protein bars. They're pretty sweet. And so I have trained my body for my whole life to recognize that when I eat something that tastes like a steak, that's protein. And so now my body, when I eat steak or when I eat meat that I haven't eaten in 2 years, like when I eat maybe a year and a half, now my body is like, well, you're not giving me any protein, because I haven't tasted the taste of meat in a long time. And so our body prepares, since we start chewing something, to transform it into energy and to digest it and to absorb it. And so our body has been trained for a lot of years to recognize the flavor of meat as the flavor of protein. So when you eat meat, your body is like, oh, she's giving me protein. And so it starts preparing to digest protein. So now I'm not doing that anymore. So now I'm giving to my body things that tastes like sweets and nuts and things that don't taste like meat, but that is my source of protein. So I had to retrain my brain. That was causing me stress in the sense that if you eat something but you don't properly process it, that causes you physiological stress at the biochemical, biomolecular level, because your brain and your body don't know how to use those things you're giving to them. They don't know how to prepare. They're not predicting what you're doing. They're not capable of predicting what you're doing. So at this level, the source of stress is more comes from having to retrain my body. I had to retrain my body and my brain to tell them, hey, this is protein. I had to start associating the flavor of protein bars to the thought of meat, and tell my brain, this is meat, this is not sugar, this is meat, this is not sugar. And by doing that, I allowed my body now to use those protein, because before it was thinking I was giving sugar to it and it was just using the carbs, and now it's using also the protein, right? And so optimizing things is important. And so now it's predictable. Now I create a routine in which my body knows how my protein tastes like, and every time it's, like we add more things. But again, because we are doing things in a sense in a wrong way, we don't understand that our brain and our body has been trained for a long time to recognize certain things in a certain way, and then it becomes difficult for us to change, or not difficult, but like it takes effort to change how we've been trained. So at the quantum physical level, stress comes mostly from these things that have to do more with our physical and subconscious level. Although the subconscious at the quantum physical level almost disappears, in the sense that the subconscious is ultimately our spiritual self. Our spiritual self, our higher self, is always ever present, is always there, and is guiding our actions. And it's imagine we are like this huge being, and our body, as our physical body, is just a little piece of it. It's just, imagine we are like a pen, and our physical body is the little ball at the end of the pen with the pen, the one that has the ink on and that we use to write. So that's what we are. Like our physical body is like this little tiny pen with ink on it that we use to write on the pages of history. We use to change the world and to write how things are supposed to go. But we are the whole pen, right? And so the whole pen is ever present. We just don't identify with it until we understand what's going on at the spiritual level. And so that's why it's important to remember about God, because that's, regardless of your religion, that's really the ultimate truth. Once we understand that, we become aware of the whole pen, and that this body is just the ultimate piece that writes down and that makes actions that change things, but we are guided by a higher level. And so at the quantum physical level, still we are not aware of the full body that we are, and so still we don't predict everything. And so we slowly do that by starting to understand, okay, this thing is evil, this thing is good, this thing causes bad things to my body, because ultimately what is meat that comes from torture, that's evil. I'm eating evil. So until we understand also those things, we are not going to be able to fully predict our environment, because you eat, now you're sensitive. When you ascend to the quantum physical dimension, now your body and your mind and you as a person, you're sensitive to all these energetic level and evil and God level energies that surround you, and that you ingest, and that you eat, and you absorb, and that you consume, that surround you. You are sensitive to those things. However, they're still part of your subconscious level, because you're not yet in the spiritual dimension. So those things are the things you're not predicting yet. The things that you don't understand are affecting your health, are making you become stressed out, and you don't understand where that stress comes from, because it's invisible to you. Like your body can feel it, but you are not conscious about it. And so that stress comes from food, from pesticides, and it's really about, not just about molecules, it's about the energy behind them. Like if someone does something with love, that thing is going to nourish you. If someone does something with hate and in an evil way, that thing is going to stress you out, even if you are not aware of how that food is being made. And this is the same for everybody, even for people who are only still at the Newtonian dimension. However, they have to do with so much grosser stress and sources of stress that those tiny little things don't matter for them. In the sense, it's irrelevant almost. Like they have to deal with so much bigger triggers on a daily basis, that those little things, eating meat is not a big problem for them. It's like, it's like eating a McDonald's every day, and then every once in a while you have a Coke. Well, like you had McDonald's every day. like the Coke is not going to change your health, right? But if you have healthy food every day and you eat good things every day, and then suddenly you have a soda, then you're gonna be like, oh wow, I feel bloated, I feel gassy, I feel weird, because you've been healthy the whole time, right? And so in the same way, if you're in the Newtonian dimension, all these like finer types of stressors don't matter to you. But once you get to the quantum level, they do matter, even if you're not conscious about them yet. So at the quantum physical dimension, what becomes a source of stress that prevents us from ascending? Because again, for us to ascend to the higher dimensions, we have to remove the stressor or to become aware of them so that we can make them become the norm in our environment, and we are not sensitive to them enough anymore. Such as me telling my brain, this is protein. I know it tastes like sugar, but this is protein, okay? And so it's important to retrain our body or to change our environment in a way that, this is what we got today, and this is the reason why we need to ascend to change things, so that as we become more conscious, we're going to start making things more consciously, and food is going to be more conscious of all of these elements that are important. Like you can't train your body for 30 years or more about how protein tastes like, and then suddenly at 30 years you change and you're like, you know what? It tastes like sugar, but it's protein. Your body's not going to understand it unless you train it. And so it's important to start producing food also in ways that are at the quantum level and at the spiritual level, they are pure and not sources of stressor. And we're gonna get there. It's just a matter of time, but it all happens as we get conscious. A portion of the population gets more conscious, and because of that, it changes things and it makes them become more conscious as well. And because of that, it's easier to become conscious and to not have stressors and to ascend to higher dimension. It's just happening. It's just a matter of time. So once you get to the spiritual level, then the sources of stress, again, is your unconscious. It's always unconsciousness, because unconsciousness is what makes things unpredictable, and unpredictability is what makes things stressful. So once you get to the higher level, which is the spiritual dimension, because you have purified your body, you have avoided all these evil things that prevented you from ascending, and in some way still we're activating as a subconscious level your fight or flight mode, and so in some way keeping this part of your brain still active, and because of that it was turning off the parts of your brain that you need to activate for you to become conscious also of the spiritual dimension. Once you understand all of those things and figure them out, and you make everything becomes predictable and everything becomes the norm, then you have basically removed the stressors, because removing the stressors, again, is not about deleting things. It's about, if you can delete them, good. If you cannot, at least you have to make them become predictable and part of your normal. So once you do that, also at the physiological and biomolecular and quantum level, then you can ascend to the spiritual dimension, because then those things are not going to send you into the fight or flight modality anymore, and then you can be more peaceful and more capable of activating your consciousness also at the spiritual level. And then once you get to the spiritual level, then there is a higher level of consciousness that you need to acquire, which is the level of God. But for you to acquire that, you have to remove every source of stress. Like, you have to turn your stress into zero. The only way of doing that is faith. The only way of doing that is surrender. There's no other way, because ultimately what sends us into stress is fear, right? Like, when your environment is unpredictable, you're constantly afraid because you don't know how things are gonna go. So a part of you is to constantly stay alert, for you to be like, okay, I don't know what is going to happen. Let me know. Let me see what is going to happen. So you have to be vigilant all the time. When instead you know things, then you're like, okay, this is predictable for me. And then there's a higher level, which is ultimately God. And we are not God, in the sense that God is everything, right? And so we can talk to God, we can receive messages from God, we can understand God's plans, but still what happens to our body, what happens to us, what we are supposed to do as a person may be very stressful or may be very unpredictable sometimes, because our mission is decided by God, is decided by our divine mission, is decided by the divine order of things. So sometimes we have access to the divine order of things. Sometimes we know what is going on. Sometimes we know what happens when we have our higher level of consciousness. But again, these two things go together. You cannot be faithless and at the same time be able to be aware of the divine order of things, because for you to be aware of the divine order of things, you have to be completely your fear has to be on zero, right? And so you see how these things go together. So when you go into the spiritual level, then the fear comes from realizing that there are evil people in the world, and that you are in this constant fight, and that you believe you don't know what is going on, and you don't know who is on what side, and you start having to realize, okay, this is evil, this is not. And ultimately, what I've done in the past few weeks, especially, has been to really, I had a lot of downloads about what is evil and what is not, and I realized that really, like, even the tiny maliciousness sometimes in people's eyes, sometimes it's even just indolence, like even just not taking a side, it's already evil, because you're seeing injustice and you're not choosing to do anything about it. Even the fact of not choosing to do anything about injustice, that's already evil, and so ultimately the tiniest form of evil is indolence, is laziness, which is one of the capital sins as well, right? So that is the tiniest form of evil. The capital sins are ultimately the tiniest forms of evil, because they already are a choice. For example, as soon as you take more than what you should, you are basically creating an imbalance in the system. You see, we talked about the yin and yang, the move, and that it's okay for that to happen. But things are painful in our universe because there's someone who takes too much. And when you take too much, then the universe is meant to react back. We live in a universe that works in the Newtonian physical dimension. There is cause and reaction. So as long as someone will choose to take more than what he should, then you are going to be pushed to try and take it back. You're going to feel pain so that you take it back. Because how the Newtonian physical dimension works from a mental perspective is that it works through pain and pleasure. We are guided by pain and pleasure. Like these yin and yang at the mental level, like these dynamic forces, happen through pain and pleasure. We are driven towards pleasure, and we are driven away from pain, right? And so things are painful for us when they disrupt the homeostasis of the system. And they're painful because then when something happens that disrupts the homeostasis, then we have to react by doing something in the opposite direction. For us to do something in the opposite direction, we have to feel unpleasantness or like pain for us to not react, and pleasure for us to react. But you see that if your inner engine tells you to take more than what you should, you're the one who is causing the pain. You're the source of pain, right? And if you don't react by feeling pleasure in reestablishing the homeostasis, you're not creating homeostasis either. So you're not creating justice. You're not taking part in this divine order of things. You're just allowing the darkness to take over. You're allowing things to be destroyed. You are allowing chaos to win. You're not supposed to. If you're part of this universe, you're supposed. If you're part of the kingdom of God, if you're part of this universe, literally, you're supposed to react by feeling pain if things are not in homeostasis, and to feel pleasure when you bring homeostasis back. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Already the choice of taking more than what you should, or of indolence, of not doing anything to change things, you are already choosing of not being part of the kingdom of God, or not being part of this universe, because this universe works in this way, works through cause and effect. But if you don't have any effect in seeing injustice, what are you doing? What are you building? What are you here? You're an imposter. You're not from here. You're not supposed to be here. This is not your home. You're not taking care of it. You're trying to destroy it. Who will try to destroy their home? Someone who is not from here, someone who does not want to be here, someone who is trying to just create chaos, that's evil, and so indolence is already a form of evil. So the stress mostly comes when you are at the spiritual level already. The stress comes from not understanding these things, not understanding why do people do these things, and not accepting, because it's a matter of acceptance, accepting others for what they are. It's not a matter of trying to change them. It's a matter of accepting others for what they are, accepting the fact that there are people who are evil, period. And this is something I had to accept. It's been a hard pill to swallow for me, because again, when you don't have evil inside, it's difficult for you to accept that there are people who truly, even by having a choice, they will choose at least indolence. At least indolence. I will never be able to choose indolence. If I see something wrong, I have to change it. It's impossible for me to do otherwise. And so the stress at that point comes from not wanting to accept the truth and taking things on your hands instead of leaving them to God. And what I mean by that is understanding again that there is a divine order of things. And once you understand the divine order of things, then things are going to become predictable. But for you to understand the divine order of things, you have to let go of control and understand that there is a divine order of things that is not under your control, and that there is a way in which things are supposed to go, that you're not supposed to control, and you have to leave it to God. Once you understand that you have to leave it to God, and you do, and you leave it to God, and you're like, okay, God, you're going to take care of this. I know you're going to do that. Once you do that and you have faith, then fear goes away. And once fear goes away, then again, everything becomes predictable, because then you access a higher level, which is the divine order of things, and you understand, okay, now it's predictable for me. Now I understand how things work. Now I understand what people are going to do. Now I understand what I am supposed to do, and I expect for things to go in a certain way, because I know that this is how the world works. And you see how removing stress is not about removing stressors in the sense of removing them. Is about, for now, when you are at war, again, there is a spiritual war ongoing, which translates into a war at all levels, because we are these pens, right? And so when we all are pens, we only see the ink on the paper that we are drawing through our actions, but the same is just a reflection of what the whole pen is doing, of the whole body is doing, right? And so our spiritual selves are ultimately at war in this evil versus God war, and is currently ongoing. And so the stress comes from all of these things ongoing. And obviously, in a war, the best way of sabotaging your enemy is to prevent people from taking part in their side. We are 7 billion people, 8 billion people on this planet. If half of us side on the other side, or don't know what they're doing, if the majority of us don't even know what they're doing, then it's easier to get them to do something that is evil, right? And so it's important to remove stress so that we become aware. You see that it's not about the stress goes away and then you ascend to a higher dimension. Is you becoming aware of the stress and making it predict, because we are at war. And in a war, the only thing you can do for you to become conscious and to ascend to a higher dimension is to become aware of how the environment works, to make it become predictable, and then you're going to ascend to a higher level of consciousness in which that is actually going to become predictable. And so faith can help at every level, in the sense that immediately, as soon as you have faith, you start ascending to higher levels of consciousness and to see everything as predictable. So faith helps at every level, and even not just faith in God, faith in yourself sometimes, faith in yourself, faith in your worth. Like the very first thing to do in a Newtonian level is to get rid of the gaslighting that makes you believe that you're not good enough, that you're not worth it, that your vision of the world is wrong. Once you get rid of that, you're basically having faith in your own view of the world and in yourself. Once you do that, then you see the truth and things become predictable. Until you don't trust yourself, you don't have faith in yourself, that's when you're triggerable, that's when you're on PTSD, right? As soon as you regain faith in yourself, because again, we are reflections of God, right? So faith takes different levels as well. So as soon as you become faithful about your own vision of the world, then things become predictable at that level. And then you get to the quantum level and you don't see that the molecules that you're ingesting and that are causing you stress at the subconscious level and that are preventing you from ascending to higher dimensions. However, your body starts reacting in a certain way, and if you have faith about your feelings, about what you're perceiving, about what you're experiencing, then you realize, okay, you can associate, okay, I feel this way every time I eat this thing, or I feel this way every time I talk to this person, even if the whole world tells me that I'm wrong, or tells me that I'm woo-woo, or tells me that I'm crazy, or tells me that psychic doesn't exist, or, even if the world around me is unconscious, still, I believe in myself, I trust myself, I have faith in these things, I have faith in what my body is telling me. So again, faith allows you to make your environment become predictable. And then you get to the spiritual level and then you're like, okay, I'm doing all these things, God, but why things are not going as I expect? Why am I not being rewarded? Why am I struggling? And then you have faith and you're like, okay, this is what I was supposed to do from the beginning. I was born for this. I was channeled in this mission from the beginning. I was supposed to do exactly these things, even if these seem at the mundane level like very tiny little things, and instead are part of a much bigger design, and I have a huge role, and I have to carry this role, and I have to carry out this role, and I have to carry out this mission. I have to finish it. I have to do it. And so once you realize that you have faith in the divine order of things, you have faith in God, you have faith that there is something higher than you, you have faith that your higher self exists. And once you have faith in your higher self, then you find your higher self. When you have faith in things, then those things become real because you have faith and they are real. You just are capable of finally reconnecting with them. And so your environment becomes predictable. So, ultimately, stress is what causes most of our pathologies, most of our mental illnesses. So it's important, if you're still at your very lowest level, which is the Newtonian physical dimension, to really try and reduce stress at a minimum in every possible kind of way you can, so that your body has much lesser things to consider as normal and to predict. So if you're in a toxic relationship, for example, if your boss is toxic, if you're in a toxic environment, if you live near LAX and you're constantly bombarded by this noise of airplanes, like whatever kind of stressor you go through, the more you decrease stress, the easier it is for your body and for your brain to turn off your fight or flight mode and to ascend to consciousness. So doing that is fundamental, but at the same time, again, it's a matter of believing in your own body and in your own discomfort. Like if you're not a comfort, you should say that to yourself. You should admit it to yourself. You should admit to yourself, I am not a comfort, I'm under stress. By admitting that, immediately you're going to start seeing the stressors, and things are going to become predictable because you're going to be able to be like, okay, these things triggers me in this way, and that's bad. And that's already predictable, because if you don't accept that is happening, or that thing is a stressor, you consider your state of stress as your norm. That's not what you want to do. You have to consider the environment as the norm in that moment, but the fact that they are stressors is not the norm. Like the fact that they are stressors should be something that is a red flag, you know. When something is a stressor, that means that you need to change that, right? So you want to become aware of it. You want for that to become predictable, but you don't want for it to you don't want for your state of stress to be the norm. You have to ascend. So once you realize, okay, this person triggers me every time, this person is hateful, this person is, or I react in this way to this thing and doesn't make me feel good. Once you start having faith that those feelings are real and that that's not okay, then you start ascending to higher levels of consciousness. Then you start observing the world. Then you have a higher perspective on things, and you're going to be able to be like, okay, this is not okay. Let me go now contact a little bit from this person. Let me try to avoid doing these things, or let me try to understand, to go inward and understand, why is this triggering me? What is the trauma I need to solve? So that is the very first step. And once you start doing that, then you're going to see that after you start asking questions and going inward and observing outward and having this constant conversation with your body, with yourself, and listening to your body and perceiving and be like, okay, so how am I feeling today? So when you start being more observant of the world around you, of yourself, and taking a step back and having a higher perspective on things instead of constantly being in this back and forth and action and reaction and cause and effect, when instead of identifying with the person reacting, you start observing, and we go back to the witness modality that we talked about a lot in the first season especially. When you start observing, then fear immediately goes away, because it's not you going through things, it's just your body and your trauma and your ego, and you start being external to this. Then you start decreasing your stress, and things start becoming just part of the environment. And by doing so, you allow the conscious parts of your brain to grow, to activate, and to allow you to have a higher level of consciousness. And from then on, if you keep doing this process over and over and over at every stage, then it's just inevitable that you're going to reach the highest level of consciousness that you can. It's just how it's going to go. You just have to keep doing the same process over and over and over instead of stopping it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode that talked about a lot of different things, because this is an introduction to this new season. In a sense, it's an introduction about all these topics, because this, like, having this view on how the universe works is fundamental for you to understand everything else that I'm going to be talking about in the next episodes. And I can't wait for you guys to listen to the next episode. This is going to be an interview. I can't wait for you to listen to that, and let me know how you like this, and leave comments, and please feel free, and please support me through the link in the description, in which you can donate to me to support this podcast and to support my mission in the world and my whistleblowing and political activity that I'm doing in science frauds and human trafficking. So please feel free to go and reach out and let me know what you think about this podcast, and if you want to collaborate, or if you would like to be interviewed, or if you know someone that you would like for me to interview, just let me know. Feel free to interact and send me an email at info@360holisticcoach.com, or you can follow my Instagram at 360holistic.coach, or you go to my website at 360holisticcoach.com and check out what I'm doing. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.